And now for something different. In today's episode, I answer questions in real time over Skype. Stick around. Hi, my name's Tom Froese. I'm an illustrator in Vancouver, British Columbia, and this is my vidcast where I answer your questions about illustration. My goal is to give you insights and inspiration that will help you become a better illustrator. If you find this video helpful in any way, please hit that like button. A like is just a small way of letting me know you appreciated the video, and more importantly, it makes this video more discoverable to other people looking for this kind of content. It takes a lot of effort to put together these videos, put them online, and well, if you enjoyed the content, just liking it is just a small way of giving back and helping contribute to the community of what this channel stands for. Please also consider subscribing. If you love the videos that I'm putting on here, you're a regular listener and you haven't subscribed yet, subs are the best way of letting me know that you guys are really enjoying the content. So it's super encouraging. I see every time a person hits that subscribe button, I see your name come into my email as a notification and I say, thank you. So as an experienced illustrator, I get asked questions fairly often, both by people who are curious about how to get into the field and also by fellow illustrators who are just curious about my approach to working, what my process is and stuff like that. You guys know the deal. I started this channel as a way of answering questions from you guys kind of once and for all. The idea being that if I can answer one person's question in a video that I can post online, make available to a broader audience, it's just making very effective use of my time and really leveraging that question and just making a resource for others that is useful and helpful. In a way, this is just like an ongoing interview between you guys and me. You guys are the interviewers and I'm the interviewee. Okay, so sometimes I get asked one or two questions like this that I can answer in this way, like your questions come in over YouTube or they come in the comments of a video here on this channel. But other times people actually want to sit down and have coffee or have a call and chat a bit longer. And these conversations are often really fun, but more importantly, they actually end up being really interesting. And I often wish that they could have been recorded for more people to benefit from. So that's exactly what I've started doing. And just yesterday I had a call with someone and she asked me questions in real time over Skype and we recorded it. So today I'm happy to present to you this conversation with Hilary Moses. She's an illustration and animation instructor at Capilano University, which is here in Vancouver. She's also an MA candidate at the University of Hertfordshire. I don't know how to say that properly without laughing. If you want to find out more about Hilary's work, I'll leave some links in the show notes. Before we get into the interview though, I just wanted to share a bit of news with you guys. So first, I'd been talking to you guys a little bit about my talk at Skillshare in New York. Did that in March, so that's over a month ago now. Anyway, it was a great talk, had a great time. I really talked about how Skillshare has been such an amazing platform to be involved with, and it's been hugely beneficial to me, but it hasn't come without its struggles and costs. So I talk about some of the harder, more key struggles that I've experienced, and then how I was able to kind of overcome those struggles and actually turn them into advantages, or how I've reaped advantages in spite of those struggles. So that talk is now available on Skillshare. You can find that up there. You can find it actually linked to my profile, so skillshare.com/Tom Froese. I also just wanted to quickly follow up on a post I did on Instagram a week or so ago. It says changes in the air, and I feel like I may have left you guys hanging and that it was vague, and it was kind of deliberately so. So I'm not fully ready to talk about what's going on, but it's mostly because I actually am in the process of defining what is actually going on. It's not like I have some, like I'm quitting being a freelance illustrator and going getting a job, or I have some crazy new gig. It's nothing like that. It's more internal, has a little bit to do with what my goals for 2019 are, It's a lot about letting go of things that up to this point have been very helpful, but also very safe. And now I need to let go of these things. They're kind of like status symbols and fences that keep me safe. And now it's time to let go of that status symbol because it's kind of weighing me down, and break through the fences that I've built to keep me safe, so that I can keep growing and having adventures and ultimately like being satisfied. I really believe that in order to have a satisfying career as an artist, probably as anything, as anyone, as humans, we need to keep having challenges. If it's too safe, we grow stagnant. I don't like when things just feel like they're resolved and I can just coast. I don't mind this for a little bit, but eventually I start growing stale, and I feel it, and I feel dead inside. I'm acutely aware to this feeling of of something inside of me. It's atrophying. Yeah, atrophying. It's like if you have been working out and running, and your body's in shape, and then after a while you kind of coast on what you've done, but you don't do any more exercises, or you're doing just the minimum to maintain. You start to literally feel weak, and your muscles literally shrink and get smaller. And so I feel like that happens very literally with our creative muscles also. And so it's just important to keep having some kind of friction to push back on. Anyway, how's that for vague? I will keep you guys posted on this process of what it means that changes in the air. And there will be some definite steps that I can share with you guys soon, but now is not the right time. So that's it for news and chit chat. I wanted to read also some viewer comments that have come in, and there were 3 comments in a row by 3 different people, and they all kind of come from people in they're a little bit older than me, so not too much older than me, but like in their 40s or 50s, and they talk about how my videos have been helping them kind of work through some of their own challenges as creatives at this later point in their career, or in the middle of the midlife stage of life. And I just find that interesting. I find it interesting that apparently a significant part of my audience are people at this stage. And I really appreciate this, because this is, I was a late bloomer in terms of just getting into my career, which was at 26. Now I know that doesn't sound like late, but I started my degree at a time when most of my friends already had graduated from their undergrad, and some of them even had started families. So that feeling of coming in late at the game, but realizing that there's so much opportunity still, I still think that translates into your 30s, into your 40s, into your 50s. I mean, I think of Debbie Millman, who didn't really start her creative career, and now she's wildly successful as a podcaster, as a designer in New York. She didn't start her career until she was into her 40s. And so I'm going to just read some of these viewer comments just because they really touched me. And this first one comes from Colin. He says, "Thanks for all your videos, Tom. I'm 44 years old and had completely lost my confidence and ambition to work as an illustrator. Your Odd Bodies course has inspired me to start sketching and gradually get back into illustration. I have absolutely no expectations other than to enjoy drawing and regain that passion that I have lost for 20 years. The reality of life and paying bills took away that ambition. Thank you for your inspiring work and advice. I hope I can find the confidence to share my work on Instagram in the near future. Thanks." So I really appreciate that, Colin. This next comment comes from Stella, and she says, "I'm 46 and started learning the design software 3 years ago to begin a career in graphic design. I struggled with Photoshop for a long time until I found your Inky Illustrations class on Skillshare. It was through watching all of your classes many, many times that I finally grasped it and grew to love Photoshop. Your beautiful work and detailed teaching really spoke to me, and now I tell everyone that Tom Froese taught me Photoshop." Well, it's an honor to teach you Photoshop, and that's like a huge thing that I want people to learn through my classes is of course I want you guys to learn the principles, the overarching principles behind why we make work, but also very importantly how to make work to get better using the tools to make it. Because when well, you're only as strong as your weakest link, and when you learn a tool, you want to be as good at that tool as possible so that you are fluent in it and making you're better able to carry out your vision truer in what you make will be truer to what you actually envisioned, if that makes sense. So thank you, Stella. This next comment comes from Brian. He says, Tom, I appreciate you so much. Your work is amazing. Your Skillshare class is fantastic, but the hope you give me personally in what you share is monumental. I'm 48 and dreamed of being an illustrator my entire life, but my wife was being deported. I needed a job and had to get something to pay the bills. Now, thanks to you and a handful of friends, I'm having a go at drawing again. Thank you for what you do and for giving so much of yourself to people you don't know and will never meet. And I'm about to cry just reading this. Like this is why I do this YouTube channel. It is because there are people who have this creative spirit and want to grow in it. And when you're bogged down by other things in life, it's hard to access that, especially in an industry that feels that it's really only made for elites. And so I just believe that there's a place for everyone in this field, and it's just a matter of making a few connections and struggling through the effort of just reaching out. And so, Brian, I really appreciate your comment, and it sounds like you had a lot of good reasons why you didn't build your creative career with all the things that you had to deal with, and I'm just super encouraged that you're finding new life and joy and creativity as a result of watching my videos. So thank you very much for telling me. Okay, I just have one more viewer comment, and it's a little bit on a different topic than age, and I got a kick out of this one. This one comes from Akbar, and he says, "You're talking about everything under the sun except the question in the title of the video." I just responded and I said, "Hi Akbar, thanks for adding your voice to this conversation. The titles of my videos relate to the main inspiration for each one. Though I tend to talk about what's on my mind, I call it chit chat, in the beginning of my videos before I get into the questions. In the vid description, you should find a link that goes right to the question itself. I do answer things in a rather elaborate style. I'm trying to be thorough. If you have questions that remain unanswered in this video, please let me know. Perhaps I can answer them in a future episode. You might have to sit through some chit chat though." Smiley face. So thanks Akbar for your comment. I really do value it. I would much prefer a critical comment than nothing at all, and certainly more than just a sort of vague thumbs down. And I've talked about this before. And Akbar, I did get a kick out of your comment just because I've talked about this before in my videos where I say, should I do the chit chat or should I jump into the questions? And I don't know what proportion of you actually like this chit chat part, but I do it. I actually like when I listen to a YouTube video, listening is the key word. I have it in the background, like I'll have Joe Rogan on for 3 hours in the background, listening to that while I work. And that's kind of the idea with these videos. You can always, it's nice to have a face to look at every now and then because you feel connected to what is being said. So that's why I actually do it on YouTube versus as a podcast format. But the chit chat is I think pretty key to most of my videos. Sometimes I just go right to the question because I just don't have a lot on my mind. But I like personally having a video that I can play, kind of set it and forget it while I work, and I don't have to worry about finding a different episode after a 5 minute video. So here's a longer video that hopefully you can use in that way. Akbar, if it's not your flavor, I understand, but thank you very much for watching anyway. Okay, that's enough for the news and chit chat. Let's get right into the interview with Hilary Moses.
Oh, hello and welcome.
Hi.
So I have a few questions to ask you. Basically, I'm Hilary. I'm a teacher at Capilano University. I've been an animator for a really long time, and now I'm doing my master's in illustration, which is at the University of Hertfordshire. It's an online master's. And part of my study was to find a practitioner in my field that I could interview. And thankfully, I found somebody in my city that I can interview, which is really great. And somebody like you who has an international standing was really exciting for me because there's a lot of because we live in the same province and you're Canadian. And so there were some questions that I could ask you that, related to what I was doing. I don't want to take up a huge amount of your time. So I've got these questions kind of limited to sort of 10 to 15. But let me know if we go over and you can just say, that's it, I've run out of time. Okay?
Sure. Yeah.
Excellent. So how did your role as a design director inform and help your practice as an illustrator?
How did my role as a design director kind of influence my career as an illustrator?
Yeah.
Did I hear that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was a design director for less than a year, probably less than half a year. But I mean, that was kind of my track at that point, being basically a designer, art director. And I'd say it's profoundly influenced my practice as an illustrator. I would say being an illustrator was kind of a unexpected result of being a designer. And I feel like just like I trained to be a designer, I always wanted to be a designer, and illustration kind of just started slowly becoming more and more prominent as part of what I did until I was like, this is all I want to do. And but I feel like as an illustrator, I like if I put myself among other illustrators, I feel more like a designer because of that background. And I guess that would mean like I feel like anyone who's gone through a design program, you understand typography, you understand layout, you think about things in terms of usability, end users, those kinds of things, much more, at least differently than an illustrator would. An illustrator is much more like your stereotypical artist in the sense that it's more like about you and your style, a little bit more expressive. And so I came into my career as an illustrator in that way as a designer, and I come into a lot of my projects from that standpoint too. Even my process as I guide clients through an illustration project, I feel like a lot of the skills that I have in doing that, in persuading, selling ideas and stuff like that, those are very influenced by how I operated as a designer, for
Mhm.
instance.
Okay, excellent. Um, so can you tell me a little bit more about the Glen Gould poster project? How did that come about?
The Glen Gould poster project. So that's the poster in the background there. It's funny.
Yeah.
Um, I just got an email from, I guess, a design studio in Toronto. They're called Gilbert Lee,
Hmm.
and I assume that Polaris is their client, and they Gilbert Lee reached out to me about the opportunity. So just came to me like most jobs do, like client work.
Right, right.
Yeah.
I mean, this is unscripted, but a quick question. Are you pitching with other people for that kind of stuff, or do you think at that point you're the only artist that they're interested in? How does that
Oh,
work?
well, for that, I was one of many artists
Mm.
contacted for that particular year, that series.
Hmm.
So how I was chosen or what vetting process they had on their end of
Hmm.
who to contact, I wouldn't know.
Hmm.
I can only assume that just by having been in the game a while and kind of some of the connections I've made, I've
Hmm.
sort of been very deliberate at least in the past, about establishing myself as a Canadian illustrator through some of the
Mhm.
projects some of the self-driven projects I've done, and that was very
Right.
deliberate in the sense that Canada is a bit of a small pond,
Mhm.
so it's easy to there's like if you see an opportunity, I feel like within Canada, it's actually like there's a lot of opportunity to become known because there's fewer illustrators competing for that space, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And so I don't know. This probably doesn't really answer your question, but I feel like I have been very deliberate about taking advantage of that small pond kind of aspect of the Canadian illustration scene.
Oh, okay. Okay, cool. No, that's a great answer. Thank you. Who was your first client as an independent illustrator, and what did you learn from that experience?
Hmm. It's hard to find that genesis moment because there are some kind of gray areas, like when was that beginning? While I was still working as a designer, and I had some project through as illustrations. I hadn't become a fully independent illustrator at that. I'm getting caught up on the details. Let's just say my first illustration commission as a creative that I was paid and not
Mhm.
as an employee. That would have been when I was still in art school.
Oh,
And the job came through. I had instructors at my school, my type teachers, and they had a studio in Halifax called
mhm.
Co and Co, and one of their clients was University of King's College, and they had an alum magazine that
Mhm.
needed a cover and some art, uh, artwork for the inside for and that was my first ever illustration commission. And what was the follow up to that question?
What did you learn from the experience?
A lot, yeah. It was my first time working with an art director in the
Yeah.
proper sense. It wa- the it was my first time illustrating for the cover of a magazine. It was my first time illustrating a story for a magazine.
Mhm.
So from the career standpoint, from the like how to illustrate a real illustration for a magazine, there's obviously all those things that I learned.
Mhm.
I think the most important discovery would have been the maybe an early clue to how my illustrations would look and how I would approach illustrations from a style perspective. The illustration used a kind of it was very influenced by Paul Rand, and there was another artist that the art director showed me as a sort of style reference. His name's Matthew Brannon. I really got into his work just through doing this illustration. I never intended on copying Matthew Brannon's work or directly, ripping off a Paul Rand piece or anything, but very heavily influenced by a collage cutout kind of aesthetic. And around the same time, I also learned from my art director how to scan in and use kind of textures and things that I made
Okay.
physically, and that's still very much a part of how I operate as a designer today. So
Mhm.
that was probably a key thing.
Right. So there was like a process aspect to that then that
Yeah,
you took away. Yeah. Yeah.
absolutely.
Cool. I've watched some of your Skillshare videos. So I saw part of that process in one of those.
Oh, that's great.
I think, yeah, I think it was Inky Mass. But okay, so what would you say is the most challenging aspect of becoming an independent illustrator? Like just being on your own, not having that, company behind you or,
Hmm.
larger organization.
Yeah, it's going to be different for everyone. For me, it was pricing my work
Hmm.
it was just kind of figuring out like what is my hourly rate? Am I too high or too low for this job? Um,
Mhm.
so a lot of learning around
Mhm.
that. The other hard thing about just starting off is knowing when the right time to actually just go independent is. I had
Mhm.
kind of a false start about a year or two before I was fully able to fly out on my own, and I spent the summer trying to freelance. It was less as directly an illustrator. It was more like illustrator designer, see if I can get enough client work on my own. And I spent about 3 months and made about $1,000. And I was like, this is not going to support me. This isn't sustainable. I could get a job and get a lot more for my time. So I went back into the workforce for a bit, and it took me about a year or two to kind of realize things were still heading favorably in the direction of illustration. So I went back into it.
So what that I'm curious, what was different, do you think, the second time around when you went back into it?
I just had a lot more requests from
Mhm.
people outside of my job coming to me
Mhm.
that made me that it just gave me that sense that things had tilted, that kind of came over some kind of a tipping point, and people were actually
Mhm.
my name was pinging around somewhere out there, and people are finally coming and asking me to do stuff independently. So it was really just like the invitation was out there in the universe, and so I properly heard it that time. The first time it was a bit more out of like, oh, well, let's see how this goes. And I may have been overconfident in my connections at that point. And in the second time
Right,
around, I was like, okay, I experienced this last time. This feels different. This is the time. And
right, right,
it could have gone either way. But I
right.
think the kind of hidden part of that story is I didn't set out completely purely as an illustrator at that time. I probably had a 80%, 90% design client base, and I would just show only jobs on my portfolio that had a more creative, illustratory kind of feeling to them.
Mhm.
And even ones that weren't, I sort of would frame in a more illustrative way. So I
Right.
sort of engineered what things look like on the surface, and that kind of over the span of a year or so kind of solidified my position as an illustrator rather than a designer. And I just gradually started saying no to more and more design work.
Right, right. So part of that was a presentation of yourself as well, right? Making that kind of presentation, like you said, on the surface, more to, yeah, okay.
Exactly, exactly.
So, how does living rurally, and I'll put that in quotation marks because I don't
Yeah.
really know. I mean, I know that you don't live in a large city,
Hmm.
and I live partly on the Sunshine Coast, right? So that's a kind of experience for me coming into the city and then going out and back and
Yeah.
forth,
Yeah.
wanting to really be, ultimately on the Sunshine Coast all the time.
Hmm.
Um, what does living rurally help or hinder your freelance practice as an illustrator?
I think by and large it's psychological. It's sort of
Mhm,
feeling isolated, especially in the winter. You get the
mhm,
blahs, and I go through periods of feeling like uh, I guess my career my creative self needs a social life, and it's not always that need isn't always being met. So it's feeling like, man, I wish I was in a big city. I could meet up with people a little more easily.
mhm.
If I wanted inspiration, I could just go to a museum or go to a crowded place and draw. And here it so mostly it's that sort of limit on the social opportunities and the cultural opportunities. That's sort of been the biggest challenge, I'd say.
Mhm. What would you say helps it?
What would I say helps?
Yeah,
Like,
like where you're living now, knowing that you
yeah,
don't have that social aspect and the cultural aspect, but what do you think benefits your practice by the fact that you're in the space that you're in?
right. Um, I guess the easy answer is affordability. I
Yeah.
have a fairly, we get to live in a house and I have a whole room to myself. And so there's that. I don't have to pay rent in the studio. I am like a lone wolf, and I do like, and I think I need my solitude when working. And so not
Hmm.
having to share a studio with other people, I sometimes wonder if I should just do it anyway,
Hmm.
just for that very reason as a sort of stimulation. But yeah, I think I like having the quiet. Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna say the only way I'm able to pull this off living rurally is just because I had already established sort of connections to work that weren't location or specific to living in any one place. And I think, I don't know, the benefits I think are a little, I'd call them soft benefits, like
Okay.
getting it is nice to have some breathing room when I go outside. I really love going for runs and not being in crowds. So there might be some soft sort of psychological benefits of
Right.
having a
Okay.
little bit of room and space. I mean, the obvious reasons why you'd want to live away, and which why we live here and not in Vancouver. Um, but I think the benefits here are less about of living here are less about my work and career, and more about just for my family and having space and
Right.
stuff like that.
Right. Okay. Cool. Thanks. So can you tell me a bit about your agency representation? Because you've got representation with the UK and a US agency.
Yeah,
Did they approach you or did you apply to them or how did that work?
I got my first agent by sending out postcards and pursuing an agent, and
Hmm.
that was my UK agent. I specifically wanted a. I think I sent out postcards mostly to European agencies and maybe one or two American agencies. The thinking being, I need to get something as far away from Vancouver as possible, um, because because I'd been around the creative block, so to speak, working as a designer in sort of that world, and felt like I saw the ceiling of what kind of illustration or design or creative work was in demand, and
Hmm.
and so I thought, if I can uh, get someone a, somewhere far away getting me work, then the kind of work, the subjects, the context where my work will end up will be very different from what I'm used to. So I pursued that in 2013 or so, and then my U.S. agent, um, I guess, discovered me and invited me to
Hmm.
get onto their roster. So that was how that worked out.
So just out of curiosity, the UK one that you pursued and went after, did you feel that you were in the right, that your work was in a similar vein to what they represented, or what was the thinking behind choosing that particular agency?
That's a fantastic question, because that's the element when people ask me, how to find an agent, how to pursue an agent. That's off of my list of things I advise, is to understand, or put it another way, you want to be represented by an agency you have resonance with, that you love, that you admire, and that you see yourself being a part of. It's sort of
Mm-hmm.
like it's a dream team for you, and you want to be a part of that dream team. And
Right, right.
you don't want to be, um, yeah. And just in terms of positioning, like there are some agencies if you've done some research and looked at different agencies around the world, they curate they tend to curate or collect a certain kind of illustrator. When I went and researched the illustration agencies, I first kind of I picked Europe, and then I picked England, and then I kind of narrowed into sort of like, here are a few that I feel like they're doing interesting work. I like most of the illustrators that they have on their roster in terms of like, I felt like I wanted to be a part of that. It was aspirational for me. So it was like, these people are too good for me. It's not unlike looking for the ideal partner. You want someone, not someone that you feel like, oh, that'll be comfortable. Well,
Right.
she'll probably go along with me. You want someone who's a bit of a challenge. And so that was kind of what I was looking for. And um, I also kind of looked at who their clients were, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And these days, actually, I look at a lot of, I'm always looking at what other agencies are doing still, just out of interest, and they all claim the same clients. They're all saying we did work for Nike. We all did
Right.
work for Nike and Google and whatever.
Right.
But when you see the proof in the pudding in some of their
Yeah.
how that actually looks, those are all attractive to me for sure.
Yeah. How long did that take?
How long did that search take?
Yeah, and between you searching and looking at those kind of European UK agencies and you signing with the UK agency that you did, how long was that process?
Um, Again, when did that process start? Did it start when I had my postcards? Did it send when
Oh, okay.
you know,
Hard to
but
sort of
let's just say the response time from the time that I sort of sent out my postcards was very fast.
right.
As almost as quick as it took for the postcards to arrive in their doorstep, which was very lucky for me. I I knew I had a good setup, or I mean,
Hmm.
I felt confident, um, and I kind of felt like the way I promoted myself, not only what looked good, it really reflected who I was as an illustrator, what I had to offer. I went out of my way to like hand ink letter them with my nib pen, and I felt like it was very much a part of my inky illustration kind of package. And so I was, yeah, it was pretty fast, I'd say. I mean, I'd been thinking about it. All the research and stuff took me months, but
Yeah, right, right,
that
right.
you only get that one opportunity to make that first impression.
Yeah.
And so I took my time just a little bit setting that up first.
So when you say postcards, I'm assuming you're talking analog, right? These are physical pieces of paper that you're putting in the mail. And if you were doing it now, would you still go that route? Would you still go physical like that? Or would you
Probably
suggest to students to do that?
probably not. I think today I'd focus more on nailing my website,
Mm-hmm.
and getting it in like a really attractive portfolio that really shows my strengths, really shows my work well, and shows my thinking. And this is for me. This is not necessarily advice. This is just saying, like, if I were today looking for an agent, I'd focus on my website. Of course, I'd make sure that leading up to the point of contact with an agent, that my social media is hot. Like
Mm-hmm.
I'm putting good work up, because that's what they're gonna go. They're gonna go to my Instagram. They're gonna look at how many followers I have. They're gonna look at the
Right. Okay.
images and what kind. You know what I mean? Like, they will. That's just what they'll do. And so
Mm-hmm.
I'll do whatever I can just leading up to that to make it as good as I can.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you have to be where you're at and comfortable with that.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll just set up my house as nice as possible in that way. I would consider a mail out if it aligned with the voice and style, or brand, if you will, that I'm trying to put out there.
Mm-hmm.
What I feel really postcard before, if you've taken my Inky Illustrations class or seen that class on Skillshare, that project, that postcard of the tools of the trade, that was the postcard I used, and that was like the perfect integration of of my illustration style and format. Like the medium really worked well. Letterpress worked really well for my style, and it was just this nice. It felt natural. It wasn't forced. I think that most postcards from illustrators look like advertisements because they're glossy. It's
Right,
some decontextualized
right.
artwork for some, illustrations always for a context, and
Hmm.
outside of that context, it loses its resonance because whoever's receiving that postcard isn't really audience for that
Hmm.
original illustration. It's like nice picture, it's nice art, but I think it's really hard to stand out on a postcard. But
Hmm.
maybe I'm giving myself too much credit, but I really believe that I designed those postcards to sort of overlap naturally with what I was seeing on the postcard in it.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
excuse me, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, it totally makes sense. It was great. Thank you. I'm just curious. I mean, just as on a side, one of the things we do at CAP, because I teach entrepreneurship, so they have mock interviews. And so I'm in on these interviews, and it's so fascinating to me, A, to see how a student pulls together their work, how it goes on the website, whether it's a reel or whatever, but also how it's received,
Mhm.
in terms, and I know it's a bit of a cliche to say that you have to tell your story, but that's something that really struck me about you when I started looking at your stuff online. It's clear you had a very clear idea of the narrative that you were telling, right? And I guess for that's always a challenge for students and beginners is like, when you ask them that question, a lot of times you don't really know. It
Mhm.
takes a while to figure that out. And also, I think everybody's so eager to push the launch button, right? You're really happy the fact you've got some work together
Mhm.
and you want to share it. I know that I've fallen into that trap of not pausing before I enter into that next stage, or
Right.
really, really thinking through A, who the audience is. And when I have thought about that, it's worked in my favor when I've sat and went, well, what are they actually asking me? So anyway, that's a really great answer and very interesting. So actually, I'm going to skip over the next one. Um,
Yeah,
so what?
before you go ahead, can I
Yeah.
just ask you before you go ahead, do you mind if I just ask you like what you meant by like telling like knowing what your narrative is, like what you hope your students would know before they entered in?
Well, I think you kind of answered that when you were speaking about. Well, there's two parts. One, your experience as a designer, right? You
Hmm.
had that. You weren't coming in as an individual practitioner saying, "This is me. Love me who I am," and pay, do you know what I mean? You had a
Yeah,
pragmatic aspect, right? And
right.
then the second one is stopping and going, "Wait a minute. If I want to be an illustrator, what am I showing these people, right?"
Hmm.
And if you've been getting a lot of design work, you obviously stopped and went, no, you know what? I need to reframe the narrative that I'm putting out there,
Oh,
right?
okay. Yes, yes.
So that's kind of what I mean about that,
Hmm.
especially when we have a lot of students that are multidisciplinary. So they may have storyboarding, they may have
Right.
design, they may have animation.
Hmm.
And this is always a challenge for representation, whether it's online or in reels. But I know that one piece of information that an interviewer gave back to a student, which was very interesting because they were dealing with 2D material. It wasn't like it was a time-based thing.
Yeah.
He said, "You are curating what you want me to see, and in that form of curation, you're telling me something about yourself,
Right.
right?"
Yes. Yeah,
And,
exactly.
and yeah, and I think that's what you have really nailed is like you're very particular in terms of how you want to tell the story about yourself, right?
Hmm.
Whether
Yeah.
whether and kind of leads into the next question I had, which was about areas of promotion online, because you seem to you've got the Skillshare, even in the way that you do your tutorials, right? It's very much there's a level of security that I can feel. Like I've seen your website, I've seen the Instagram. Now I think I know what I'm going to get on this, right? And
Right.
then
Yes.
you deliver what I thought you were going to deliver. And obviously
Right.
other people felt same way because you have very popular videos, right? And that's partly to do with articulation and the way you communicate, you know, and the visual connection between what you're saying and what you're showing. Does that make sense?
I think so. So what you're saying, this isn't about the like having a consistent style. You're saying like how I communicate and convey myself as a person, as a personality on Skillshare is the same as how I do on my website, as I do on my YouTube channel. Is that the idea? Like it's a consistent experience of,
Yeah.
okay. Yeah. Well,
Yeah. You know, and I guess that's how a lot of times now I'm just a random internet user, like Googling things, right? And I ran into your blog, which was about whether to get an agent or not. But I mean, someone said that to me when I was doing a crowdsourcing campaign.
Okay.
And so I was looking for an artist to collaborate. And I'd been doing this blog for a while, and it was that blog that gave her the confidence to actually respond to me. Because then she went, you know, it's clear that you're serious about what you do.
Exactly.
That so what you're that speaks to what you're saying about waiting before you push the launch button and go, you know, what does your Instagram look like? Have you got too many pictures of your cat on there?
Yeah.
You know, not enough art? That's a big question students always, you know, that's always a debate, right? What is it to you? You know, is it a personal platform or is it a professional platform? So I guess my question is, what areas of promotion online otherwise have you utilized that you feel had direct connection to securing more work for you? For instance, like the Skillshare stuff, do you think that has an effect on getting work?
Yes, and it's a huge reason why I do it. Like obviously I teach because I feel like it's something I'm good at, and I think it's a benefit to other people. So that it works out in that sense, right? You know, Skillshare is a great opportunity in terms of getting a little income. So I like that aspect of it, but I've had some pretty remarkable opportunities come through my Skillshare students, and they've given back to me. So yeah, Skillshare is one way of I never got into it originally for it. I got into it thinking like, you know, see how this goes. It's but as I very quickly realized after I taught my first class, like, okay, this is extending my reach to like these students are people learning creativity. They may be art directors, they may be designers at companies that will come back to me. So there was eventually that sense that this could materialize. But yeah, does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. That's really interesting, actually. I never really I mean, it's also about self-presentation, right? The fact that they're not all created equal, right? When you go on those things, you can really see a difference. And so then that kind of answers my next question, which was, is there experience or creative endeavor you engaged in that reaped unexpected employment?
Yeah, that was, I'd say.
Is there anything that you've done maybe that you know, or something you did on spec that then led to something bigger?
I kind of took a page from most of my design teachers, whoever I ever had, who were all unanimous in saying don't take on spec work. So
Okay.
I've always been a stickler about that.
Yeah.
I don't usually go for the grease the wheels mentality. You know, I might do something low bono or sort of at a huge discount when there's potential and I like the project, then I'll do it. But almost every creative thing that I've taken seriously, like that's a key component, I've reaped a benefit from.
Right. Okay.
So I do self-initiated projects with my friend who is a letterpress printer, and we collaborate on actual products that we sell. Right. And we do our best to get it into stores. You know, our goals down here, like let's sell it online or at craft fairs, and eventually Chapters Indigo is picking up our product and selling it across the country.
Wow.
right?
Congratulations.
So that was with The Canadianist, which is a series of letterpress prints. Just to elaborate on this one project, we've done it a few times. What we do is we involve a handful of our our favorite illustrators across the country who are, Canadian. They might be living abroad, but they're Canadian illustrators, some connection to Canada, working on a Canadian theme, a product that we think is beautiful, and it's for Canadians, and then we get it into stores and sell it. And so there's this aspect, like I said earlier, of just setting myself up as a Canadian creative, and that just bolsters that reputation. But by including other people, other illustrators, you're also making friends,
Right.
connections out to other people, and then they have their own people who they're promoting their work as part of this project too. So that extends the network to the power of five or whatever. And so that's just one example of a project that I've taken seriously. And then of course it's a bit of a risk. You spend time on it. We print these things, we pay material costs, but we believe in it, and we do our best to sort of get it out there. And so yeah, it's been taken off. Even just like early on, as a student, while I was still studying, kind of finding my voice, I started a drawing blog where I draw something almost every day,
Right.
and then posted. I was inspired and influenced by many others who did this. I didn't invent this thing, but I took it seriously as both an exercise for me to get better at drawing
Hmm.
and a way of expressing myself online.
Hmm.
And what later happened was people saw that I was good at drawing, and I actually, through this blog of probably early on, it doesn't exist anymore. I got illustration commissions, and
Right.
so yeah, all those things. If you do it and you take it seriously, you'll get a benefit from it. That's
Right.
my take on it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Um, Out of curiosity, that collaborator, was that someone you've always known, or was that a cold call where you just connected with someone whose work you liked and you thought it was going to work out, or?
So particularly with Vince,
Yeah.
Vince is the letterpress guy. Vince
Right.
Perez. He's in Kingston, Ever Loving Press, and we went to school together. So we
Oh,
were we were fellow students, and we met at school, became friends, and out of after graduation, I actually, like, we shared the same moving truck.
hmm.
uh, we both moved from the East Coast back to Ontario, so we shared the same moving truck. He was moving a giant letterpress
Wow.
on the truck, and so there's this kind of obvious, we appreciate each other's work. He's a good letterpress printer.
Mm-hmm.
I like letterpress. I like designing for letterpress. Let's see if we can collaborate on something. And it wasn't until, I think, we graduated in 2009. It wasn't until 2013 that we actually had a material thing to do together. But actually, before that, I'm giving you the long story. I hope that's okay.
Oh, that's fine. It's
um,
very interesting.
yeah, before that, he had asked me to design his website for him, and I was
Right.
still designing, and very much designing websites at the time, which I very shortly after, not because of Vince, but very shortly after, I vowed never to do websites again because of how complex they can be, and how much
Yeah.
support they need after you design them.
That is support. That's for sure.
Um, and so, but anyway, I did a website for him, and that website actually, I think it won some kind of a web design award or something like that.
Mhm.
Very, it was very popular. Kind of made the circuits around blogs, and um, the reason I'm telling you that, I think Vince was pretty satisfied with the website I made for him, and I think it just
Mhm.
kind of solidified that we could work together in some way, if that makes sense. Like, he was happy,
Yeah.
I was super happy. It felt like we had a good
Mhm.
overlap. We understood each other, and the
Mhm.
website was emblematic of that understanding. And then we just kind of slid into our first project, which was called Greetings from Canada, and that
Right.
was a series of 10 postcards by 10 Canadian illustrators and designers. and that was our first like actual letterpress collaboration.
Great. Very
Yeah.
cool. So I guess actually, when you said about doing drawing every day, I think I have a question here. Let me just see. Oh yeah. Basically, it's I say you cover many areas of social media, video tutorials, and what time management tools do you employ to manage your time? Are you still drawing every day? Do you have a daily drawing practice?
Okay, it might be two different questions in there because
It is. Yeah,
yeah.
the daily practice in there.
So there's the time management and daily drawing program. You want to do the daily drawing first?
Sure.
Daily drawing is something that's very much aspirational for me. I just I do it when I feel hungry for it or I feel like I need to. It's kind of like when you realize, oh, I've been having beer every night this week. I should probably spend a week not drinking anything. It's kind of like that, where it's like I should probably draw this more.
Right.
So yes, I ideally draw every day. I have an Instagram account called Drawing is Important where I occasionally put drawings that I do. The drawing every day thing was much more easy to do when I wasn't a dad,
Yeah.
and very much had more time.
Right. Right. That makes me feel a bit better. I was able to draw every day when I was animating because it was just like it's almost like you're not thinking that you're drawing every day because you've got, so much to do to get those few seconds on screen. But
Exactly.
so yeah, the other question about the fact that you really commit to these different platforms and you do them to a really high standard. How do you manage that all?
Sometimes I don't manage it very well. Sort of start a few fires and monitor them as I can. I was really on top of my game with Instagram for a while, and then like in the last few weeks, like as of today, like in the last few weeks, I've really just sort of been like, I've been so busy. I'm like, there's no way I can just keep doing this at the pace I was doing it. So I was just like, I'll just let it go for a bit. Like, I'm not totally abandoning it. I try and keep it warm or lukewarm at least. But yeah, in terms of managing it all, my priority is, of course, doing client work, and then in terms of like doing the YouTube channel, I try to do one a week, but even this week, the last few weeks, I've been so busy that it's like not a priority. I'll catch up to that when I can. But just try and I know are worth investing my time in. And overall, like the trend has been Instagram is worth it, YouTube's worth it, and just doing my work and just those have been my focus. And then occasionally I'll do a blog entry or some other thing. But yeah, at any one moment, I only have like a few small things that I'm actually able to take seriously, and everything else is kind of fades away for a bit.
I haven't been to your YouTube channel. What do you put on that? Is it interviews and things like this, or is there other stuff?
This will be on it, and mostly it's me just answering questions that I get. So that my YouTube channel started just over a year ago when I was kind of getting more and more questions just from people asking, how do you get into the field? Questions about agents, questions about whether I use a screen protector on my iPad, etc. So I was just like, I want to answer these questions. I don't like not answering people's emails because I hate when I write an email that's very respectful and kind to someone that I admire and I get no response. All I want is just to like, hey bud, I can't talk to you right now. I would rather that. I would rather that. I don't like, I feel like it's supremely arrogant to just not answer an email if
Right.
and I can only assume the best of people. Like people probably just are so overwhelmed with stuff like that that they don't have time. And as I get busier, I kind of understand. But anyway, the point being is like I want to be able to catch these questions and answer them once and for all. So I make it a benefit not for the person, just for the person who's asking, but for everyone who will ever ask that question. And so
Right.
I made this YouTube channel about answering these questions. And so I on average, maybe every 1 or 2 weeks, we'll just go on and answer a few questions. But I also sort of inject personal, what I call chit chat, where I just
Oh,
talk about whatever's like I give news and I talk about kind of what's on my mind. I kind of get like honest or real or whatever, and it's just I like that. I like doing that. I think it's a nice way of I've heard from comments that my audience kind of writes
mhm.
that they appreciate that honesty, that sense of like even when you're uh, you're working as an illustrator in the field and seemingly winning on the surface of things, like you still struggle with things, and so I like to give those kinds of insights about kind of like what I'm actually going through without being overly personal. I'm also
Yeah.
very direct about kind of my experiences and what I'm anxious about. But I sort of the pendulum can swing. Sometimes I get more personal, but the whole main point of it is to offer inspiration and insights that help illustrators become better.
Mhm.
That's my kind of uh, my my value proposition that I'm trying to remember, but I can't right now.
Mhm. Well, it's kind of a solitary process for a lot of people too, and I think
Hmm.
that's why I listen to podcasts. I
Hmm.
love listening to interviews with other artists, and I love watching documentaries about artists. It doesn't
Hmm.
even matter if it's my field. I just find how people their creative processes are so interesting, you
Hmm.
know? And you said what we see on the surface and then what's happening underneath. It's
Hmm.
always good. A little bit of a shakeup, knowing that every artist at some point in time, you may not, but people experience that level of self-doubt, especially when there's so many people doing stuff and you can be overwhelmed by what's being produced and what's online. So it's
Yeah.
it's you're not in the majority category for answering the email because
Yeah.
most people don't, right? It's a huge bugaboo for me. I can't stand it. I always, even when I was super busy working in video games and people would apply, I would always answer. Like you
You're
said, even if it's
you're
short, right?
a favor just by answering, and like I actually like will give very direct answers if it feels called for. Like
Yeah.
you know, just even answering. I'm always respectful, and I
Hmm.
never talk down to people. But I'll just sort of say like if you're looking for this, maybe I'm not the person to ask, or whatever it is. Just saying like this is
Hmm.
where you might want to look.
Hmm.
Yeah, I heard I kind of understand like some people it's their personality type and that their way of dealing with the anxiety of getting all these emails is just to ignore it, and I don't know what it's like to be that kind of person, so I don't want to fully cast judgment on people in spite of what I said earlier. But I did hear recently on there's a podcast called The Nose Knows by John Contino. It's a great podcast. You should check it
Hmm.
out. But there he was just John was talking about he and his uh, someone he was talking about, they were sharing kind of war stories, and they have this thing called the nuclear option, which is like you just have such a full inbox, you don't know what to do, so you just select all and trash it. And
Delete.
if it's important enough, that whoever it is will email you again. And
Wow.
I'm like, you got to be desperate to do that, and I guess that's why they call it the nuclear option.
I don't know
But
if I.
maybe I've been nuclear optioned. I don't know. But yeah.
Funny. Um, okay, so are there any tax breaks that you can take advantage of that help your business?
Mm. Best tax break is to get a tax accountant at tax time. Just
Yeah,
let them do that. I don't know.
I've got one of those. Okay. I think you've answered them. Oh yeah, the last question here, which because I had a question about networking with other illustrators, but I think you've answered that already when you talked about connecting with the Canadian illustrators and doing that project.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any new technologies that you'd be interested in learning or using in your work?
Any new technologies
Yeah,
like that I'm not using now?
yeah.
I
I
feel
mean,
like,
sorry, I shouldn't have interrupted. Go ahead.
go ahead.
No, I just was wondering if you geek out. Like I go
Mm.
down geeky rabbit holes very easily, and it's mainly partly because of the industry I'm in.
Mm-hmm.
I always seem to find some technical aspect to what I'm doing. So right now with my master's, even though I'm really into, I'm going to be doing these narrative illustrations, I want to do this AR component
I
to that.
see. I
That
see.
has gives the viewer the option to have additional content and backstory to the images
Okay.
that they're looking.
Okay. I'm a bit more skeptical
Mm-hmm.
and traditional slash minimal about things like that. So, I mean, case in point, I was very stubborn on getting on the tablet thing, uh, using only paper for sketches, scanning my sketches in, thinking like, what's wrong with pencil and paper? What am I going to get by getting this visible Wacom tablet with all these cords everywhere? I obviously saw a benefit to that. Like when I worked, I shared office space with Giant Ant for a while, and seeing all those
Oh,
animators,
yeah.
they're all obviously, I get it for animation, totally 100%. For me, I was like, I just don't need that. But of course, once I got an iPad Pro with the pencil, it's kind of like, I wouldn't say I was geeky, but like how this will help me with some of my illustration work. And then once I started using it, it won me over, and I use it for way more than I ever thought, to the
Yeah.
point where I actually use almost no inky bits now, and I'm able to use mostly Photoshop brushes.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I have to force myself sometimes to not rely on that crutch. Um, I feel like there's other. I mean, what you're describing, I feel like it's mostly productivity, like just getting faster and more efficient. You know,
Mm-hmm.
is that kind of like,
Yeah, that makes no, that makes total sense. So
yeah,
it's productivity thing.
I think so. Strictly speaking, for illustration, I am a minimalist. The whole, oh yeah, what I was gonna say, because you mentioned like VR or AR. We experimented with AR kind of early on, when I was still a designer. We did some, like, the thing where you like show a QR code to your
Yeah,
webcam, and then it would
yeah,
like, we did this thing with Malcolm Gladwell where like he was like standing in the sort of a 3D-ified version of the magazine cover that he was supposed to be part. It was really novel, but I
yeah,
did I didn't actually feel like the experience. It was novel, and maybe position that client as somehow like with it technologically, but I
yeah,
didn't actually think that it added to the narrative of what the story was about. Or I actually don't know, but I'm skeptical of whether it actually achieved the goal it was trying to do, which in this case, it was a student prospectus. It was trying to attract students to this particular school. And who knows? So I think, and like with the whole AR thing, I think AR is awesome if you want to, like, if you don't have a tape measure and you want to use your iPhone to measure the square footage of your room, or or if you want to pretend like see what IKEA furniture like will look like
yeah. I
through their
thought that
app.
would
Stuff
be
like that
handy.
is cool.
Yeah,
I have a
yeah,
much more skeptical view from engaging people for advertising or communications for that kind of stuff, and I because I feel like the entertainment value is so high, or the novelty value is so high, but the actual effectiveness of the communication can be very low. But it depends on how geeky you are, in a good sense, like in experimental. I'm more like, let's just get the job done with as minimal tools. I'm very much a retro person, and I love flat printed things. If all I could do is work in print, I would love that. So I hope I didn't just yuck your yum there, but
no, not at all. I think it's super interesting. I tend to overcomplicate things.
okay.
You know, and I even though I feel like I'm focused, sometimes I can lose my focus because there's so many candies in the shop. I want to try everything. So your point to saying things are novel, I think that's a very good one. Even in the research that I'm doing now, I'm like, okay, you've done it, but it's kind of ugly, and what's it saying, right? You know, so that's something that always comes back to in terms of teaching. We get pressures from studios to teach certain kinds of software.
Sure.
And, you know, at what point do you say, well, the core skills have got to remain, and these other things are just tools. And if that's the appropriate tool for the job, then embrace it. But if it's not, don't just use it for the sake of using it, right?
Yeah. I think for like, if you're interested on the side, you should be doing stuff like that. Be experimenting if that's where your interest lies. For me, I'm less about tech and more about technique. So
yeah, right.
So what techniques can I use given the tech or the technology that I have? How can I push it? And like there are two different kinds of people. There are people who love options and thrive and are excited by them, and other people who are just like, I don't want any options. I just want to like pick from small, medium, and large, and that's it. Like I was just recently looking for a watch, like a GPS watch for running, and there's just so many options out there. It's just like, what? I just need one simple thing. I ended up just getting Apple Watch because it felt familiar, and it seemed like I was familiar with. Anyway, that's an example. If you kind of follow me or read some of the things that I've written, options are things that I usually try to minimize as much as possible, both for myself and when presenting my work to clients, because I like to reduce anxiety. And for me, if I have too many different ways of doing a thing, I get anxious. I just want something it's like a constraint. A built-in constraint is not having, you know what I mean?
I do know what you mean. It's interesting. I think that's one of the things with your odd bodies, was really enjoying that because it's funny you saying that about options though, because I have anxiety if I feel there is an option that I haven't explored. Right?
Okay. Yeah.
So then I do the opposite. And in the past I've flummoxed clients by giving them too many options, right? And I remember working with an editor on a bunch of stuff for TV, and he's like, you're giving too much. We've got to really pull back here. So that's been part of my mandate for what I'm working on now, having come off a super complicated project, is to keep simple stupid, right?
Yeah.
I think what you're saying in terms of and I'm trying to minimize the tools. Now, having said that, I'm putting this AR component in it, but I'm trying to compartmentalize it so that the stuff on the wall exists on its own. And I sort of feel like the AR I can explore, but it's not integral to the project.
Yeah, it's like the what you need and the nice to have.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, I'm out of questions. This has been super interesting for me, and thank you so much for talking to me and getting me on Skype.
Yeah, I'm glad that worked out. But yeah, I really enjoyed our conversation, Hilary, and
good luck with it.
I'll be sure when I get this up, and hopefully the video worked. Okay.
What's your Instagram called again? The one that you said. You have your personal one, but then you had another one. You said what was drawing something?
Drawing is important.
Okay. I'll have to look that up. All right. Great. Thank you so much, Tom.
All right. Thank you, Hilary.
Later. Yeah. Bye-bye.
All right. Thanks, Hilary, so much for inviting me to have this interview with you. I really appreciate that you were willing to have it recorded and that you let me post it online here on YouTube for others to benefit from. I really had a great time chatting. I think there was just so much good stuff in our conversation. I'm really excited that others can benefit from it. So guys, conversations like this are great, but so are your questions when they come in written format. So please write them in the comments below this video. Let me know what you're wondering. Do you have questions about how to illustrate, what tools to use, anything that came up in today's episode that seemed unanswered? Let me know, and I look forward to answering your questions soon. Okay, that's it for me. I hope you guys have a great week. Keep making great work and keep asking great questions. Hertfordshire.